Hi everyone, we shall make a start. Hopefully you can all hear me clearly enough. My name is Sarah Waddett and I'm a member of Aura Council. I'm going to be hosting today's webinar before I hand you over to the Forge for the main bit of content. And if it's your first webinar with us today, you can raise questions throughout the session. You are all on mute, just because having so many of you on at the same time talking is a bit of a logistical nightmare. So there is a Q&A box at the bottom where if you have any questions throughout, you can feel free to type them in there. And I will be answering them either throughout the session or towards the end of the session as well. If you have any problems, if sound dips out or anything happens, there's also a chat function where you can post a message. And if I get enough of you and it looks like an issue our end, then I can hopefully have a look at it for you. But so far, so good on these webinars. But do let me know if you have any problems. But thank you very much for joining us. For those that can't see the screen, PDFs of the slides are available on our website. They're under the resources tab. So you should be able to follow along by that way. So we're going to hear from the Forge today. We've got Lee Manning-Craik and Simon Garnett talking to us. It's going to be going over some of the topics that were covered in our recent seminar around customer centricity. It was a really popular session, and so they're coming back in for this webinar to go through some of that detail again. I will now hand you over to them to pass through. Please do ask questions as you go, and I will catch up with you towards the end of the seminar. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah, I appreciate that. Just to give you a little bit of background in terms of what we're going to be talking about today. This is a model that we've developed, initially working in conjunction with Unilever, that has become really useful as we've started to use it to apply to some of our clients' challenges more broadly. And we've now applied it across a wide variety of different clients. And we're hoping that you'll find some benefit from it. It's a very, very simple framework. We'll talk you through what the two key dimensions of it are. We'll talk you through why it's come about, and then we'll show you how you can start to use this thinking to frame some of the challenges that you might be having in your own business. Just to give you a sense of who we are from a Forge perspective, if you haven't heard of us before, we're a business that's 6 years old, and effectively what we focus on is insight and strategy consultancy, working on a range of consumer and customer challenges across a broad range of different categories, different businesses, different geographies. We're a director-only business, so there's a small team of us. There are 8 of us in the business, which is wonderful if you like us and not so great if you don't. But we effectively work across all of our different client challenges. We've got years of experience behind us, and we come to a challenge with a wide variety of different skill sets, which means that we can work extremely quickly through our different client challenges. We work across, as I mentioned, a wide variety of different clients, tackling both customer and consumer challenges. And where we talk about customers, assume we're talking about consumers as well. As we go forward, we won't be referencing those as individual things. What we're going to share with you today, as I mentioned, is what we've called the big framework for growth. We're not wedded to the names. If anybody's got a better one, please do let us know. But effectively, it's a model and a way of thinking that's about building customers and customer centricity into the heart of a business, and really kind of getting our customers to help facilitate the decision making that very often some of our businesses struggle with. What it's built on is an understanding that delivering to customers is absolutely key to growth, which is something that all of us know. That won't be new news. Businesses that best understand their customers and their consumers, both now and in the future, are the ones that are increasingly the ones that we see winning. And it's this interplay of both of those dimensions, the ability to understand now and the future, that is the basis of the model that we've developed. And the reason for that is because if we have an ability to understand customers now and their needs now, and we have an ability to understand how those might change, that gives us real clarity on the potential opportunities and the risks associated with how people might change their behavior and the impact that might have on our category. And the businesses that are constantly aware of these potential shifts in the market dynamics around them are the ones that are, as a result, able to manage their commercial performance and effectively act to profit from change. And we can see this consumer behavior evolving at a really kind of frightening speed. And we can see also in some of the examples here, both the risks and the opportunities that it presents for us. So, you know, the rise in portfolio shopping, no doubt about it, there were certain retailers who were very well geared up to capitalize on what became quite a quick and quite an established way of shopping, more so than others who were more geared around a outmoded to some degree kind of way of shopping. Similar when we think about content streaming, you know, the likes of Blockbuster, etc., weren't as well lined up to deliver to people's constant need for content in the way that a Netflix was, a Spotify was. Love Films came into that category just as it was transitioning, but then couldn't pivot quickly enough to kind of maintain its foothold as content streaming kind of became the new norm. And we see a similar kind of thing in the world of digital imaging. Again, everybody knows the example about Kodak, etc., compared to the likes of Instagram and Apple, which have really capitalized on how people's worlds have become so digital. Now, those are quite kind of old and well-known and well-established examples, but if you think about this kind of behavior change across your categories and across things that we can see now, there is no doubt that it just continues to evolve at an enormous speed. So everyday sustainability has led to a massive opportunity for SodaStream, who were really able to kind of reframe their proposition and put themselves as deliverers of a everyday in-home sparkling water supplier, which has built a massive business for them. Similar thing around kind of plant-based foods. Clearly that's having an impact in our more established meat categories, but it's really opening up an opportunity for businesses like Impossible and the joint ventures that they've taken on board. Really similar thing if you're thinking about permissible consumption and what that's doing for the CSD category versus more permissible, more acceptable, healthier for you options like the behaviour category, behaviour brand is in and of itself, but as a demonstration of a broader category. And same thing from a crafted solutions. You think about the pressure that's putting on mainstream beers compared to the opportunity that it unlocks for brands like Brewdog in that kind of space. So this behavior change is continuous, it's happening all around us, and it's very likely kind of happening in your categories as well. As we talked to our clients about what was going on and about how they kind of capitalize on behavior change that they were noticing and observing around their various different categories, there are a number of things that really consistently come through in terms of being blockages to being able to kind of compete effectively within a context that is continuing to change. And the things that our clients told us is that we've got no shortage of data, and increasingly so, a real multitude of different data points that we can access. The struggle is to link that up, to create a single-minded view of customers' lives and their behavior that then informs how we adapt and respond accordingly. They told us that there's a challenge in framing what's going on from a customer perspective in a simple way that the whole business can understand, and being able to make that kind of commercially impactful so the business knows what to do differently and as a result. They tell us that we're very good at being able to diagnose what's happened, but increasingly what we're less good at is having a sense of what is going to happen in the future. All of us have kind of no doubt built our careers in understanding consumer behavior as it was in the past, but increasingly the need is to understand how that might change going forward. They told us that we make investments in our insight gathering capability, but try as we might, it's still a struggle to make insight actionable, and that's a key gap, being able to bring the consumer voice into the business in a way that the business knows what to do as a result, and feels confident making those choices. And very often that's because they're struggling to quantify the commercial impact of insight. And that as a result hinders the business's ability to influence investment decisions. So, having heard this from a multitude of different clients in a multitude of different ways, we have created what we've called the Big Framework for Growth, which really is designed to help bridge this gap in consumer understanding and the impact that consumers should be making in our businesses, and kind of bring them into the boardroom in a way that gives the business confidence that it can make some tangible kind of difference, strategic changes as a result. So it's a model that's built off two very, very simple dimensions. Both of these dimensions are things that drive consumer choice. The one is about understanding consumer motivations. As you can see on the top left-hand corner, it's about understanding what are the current motivations, but then stretching that view to getting a clearer understanding of what might the future motivations be. And it's similar for the vertical axis as well. Here, what we're looking at is solutions. How does the category currently deliver to motivations? but what might solutions in terms of products, services, and or experiences be in the future? And just to give you a couple of examples around those two different dimensions before I hand over to Simon to talk about them in a little bit more detail. When we're thinking about solutions, this is an example that's been drawn from the hair care category. There might be a variety of different ways that we can deliver solutions within the context of thinking about kind of hair taming or hair management. Some of those might be well-established current solutions, which are product-based, like shampoos and conditioners or masks, etc. Some of them might be tools, again, pretty well established in the category, like straighteners. But if you start to look to the future, to what other solutions might be emerging, well, increasingly there is a set of tools that are starting to use a different dimension of technology, in this instance, steam straighteners. They're starting to use technology differently. We can see some treatments that are coming through that used to be the domain of experts within the salon environment that are now increasingly kind of coming into the home. And we can start to see some services playing in this space as well that help people to build more customized or personalized solutions for themselves and their hair care challenges that they might be facing. So a variety of different potential solutions kind of playing against that axis. Similarly, when we start to look at motivations, yogurt is a very excellent category that shows how it has changed to respond to the different motivations that consumers might have. So, you know, started as a category which was about an accessible, everyday treat to some degree, but then began to recognize that consumers were looking to manage their weight. So a set of dieting propositions were developed, began to notice that people were increasingly looking to manage various functional health components. So, you know, a big gut health business developed as a result. Started to notice in the recession years that people were looking for accessible indulgences. So again, you know, responded to that. And increasingly, we're starting to see some future motivations coming through that the category is responding to around sustained energy, around specific types of fortification, and around propositions that respond to people's dietary necessities, whether that's because you have a health issue that requires you to strip some things out of your diet, or because you might have an ethical philosophy or point of view that requires you to kind of manage your diet differently. So it's a category that's very nicely spreads itself around the current motivations, but then is well lined up to understand and to respond accordingly to the future motivations. So those are the two key dimensions around which the model is built. And I'm going to hand over to Simon, who's going to take you through a little bit more detail around each of the different quadrants that are thrown up as a result of these different axes, and then talk you through how you might start to think about this model in your own businesses and make it work for some of the challenges that you might be facing.
Great. So we'll take a look at the 4 quadrants. So we'll start off in the top left-hand corner. This is the current motivations and the current solutions. So this effectively is your category today. If there's one word that best defines this quadrant, it's the word better. This is about existing motivations, existing solutions, but doing things better. What do I mean by that? Well, probably one of the best examples there to look at is Heineken Zero, a beer that's been one of the most successful innovation launches in the category. Low alcohol beer as a motivation, low alcohol, you know, managing your consumption levels, restraint, that is not a new motivation. That's existed for a long time. No alcohol beers are also not new. They've existed for a long time. The problem is they taste rubbish. They've just been a really poor product. Heineken Zero have come along with a product that actually tastes pretty good, and lo and behold have created incredible success. So there's nothing fundamentally new and different here. They've just done it substantially better. Or take Nivea black and white deodorant. No white marks deodorant have existed for a long time. What they did was they created a product that A, was just very good technically, but B, and really importantly, they created a really simple proposition. Keeps your black stuff black, keeps your white stuff white. People can get their heads around it. Lo and behold, incredibly successful. Fever Tree, a tonic water, again, the motivation to mix with your spirits, not new, tonic, not new, but they've done it in a more adult, a more sophisticated, a more natural way, created a business bigger than Schweppes in sort of 13, 15 years, something like that. Some of you might be looking at Monzo thinking that's a weird one to put there in kind of current motivations, current solutions. So let me try and explain the reason why we put it. If you go back to base principles about what Monzo is a online digital first bank account. Well, I've had a digital bank account since the early 2000s with Barclays. Problem was, it just wasn't very good. It still isn't very good. Monzo have come along and created a really intuitive, really simple user interface, and they've just done that same motivation, that same solution, much, much better than the competition. And likewise, the Dyson hairdryer there, still the same, it's just better because rather than just blasting with one constant temperature, they've evolved it so it can sense the temperature of your hair and adjust accordingly. So key word there is better. If we move down to the bottom left-hand quadrant, here we're talking about current motivation still, but with new solutions. So this is really redefining how a category operates. And in doing that, let's take a look at some of the examples. So purple bricks, great example. You know, the motivation to be able to sell your house has existed for, you know, as long as property itself. But what they did is they came along and said, well, rather than having to pay someone to do the whole thing, actually, there's a lot of this you can do yourself, and we will just enable that for you with a new solution. Or Seventh Generation with their natural cleansing. It's still the same motivation to clean and make sure my laundry or my house is safe and secure. They've just done it with natural rather than chemicals. Laundrette, rather than you having to go to take your dry cleaning to the laundrette, they will come to you. Harry's razors, the same. Zenium is a toothpaste which, rather than using harsh chemicals, uses your body's own natural bacteria to solve it. The key here is this isn't about redefining what a category can do in terms of new motivations, but how those solutions can operate, and those solutions offering an opportunity to trade up, to drive frequency, maybe to steal share. The third space is actually redefining what categories mean in people's minds. So suddenly a category going, I didn't realize it could do that. So bringing in new motivation. The best example I think of this is Dettol, who came along and said, everything else in your house you worry about in terms of keeping it clean and bacteria safe, antibacterial, why not your laundry? And people went, I've only really thought about my laundry for softness and comfort and whites being whiter. Actually, that's an interesting motivation. That's something that appeals to me. I need to do that. Or Dove with deodorants and their underarms. He said, actually, yes, it needs to fight odor and wetness, but what about making your underarms look beautiful? Or Rafa, who decided, you know, for any weekend warriors on the call, said to you, well, you don't need to drive around like a billboard for an obscure Central European bank with your typical cycling kit. Actually, you can look quite stylish. We'll bring that, like the original Mac did as well. And then finally, we get to the bottom right-hand quadrant where we have new motivations and new solutions. And this is really about changing the rules of how a category operates. I think one of the best examples here is Vitality Health Insurance. Up until that point, health insurance was a very reactive, passive thing. If you got ill, it would bail you out. And they said, well, actually, why can't we change that? Why can't we have cater to the motivation people have, which is, I actually want my health insurance to help me be healthier, not just be a safety net for when I'm ill. Can you help me be healthier? And then they've created a solution which integrates with data from Fitbits, etc., geolocation to tag you in when you get into the gym to offer a new way of doing it. Tesla, I also want to just touch on, we all know that, you know, that motivation around reducing the carbon footprint, and many of you will be kind of thinking that solution not to create not just the best environmentally friendly car, but the best car that happens to be environmentally friendly. And those are both really true. But there's one other key thing that they did as a new solution, which is they cut out the middleman. They said, you don't need to go to a dealer. You can buy direct. You can come to us. Such was the extent to which they are changing the rules that they are being sued in several US states by the car industry who feel so threatened by this level of disruption that they bring. So there you have it. Those are the four quadrants. I think the key point I want to land here, and if you forget everything else that I've said, please, just this one thing is most important, is there is no value judgment here about where you should choose to innovate. I talk to a lot of my clients and I hear conversations like, well, it's only if we're in the bottom right-hand quadrant that we're doing true innovation. Everything else is kind of we're sort of playing. I could not disagree with that more strongly. Every single one of these quadrants represents an opportunity for customer-centric growth. I've shown you examples in that top left-hand space who have completely driven massive commercial returns, but from an existing motivation and solution. Equally, you can change the rules, and there are other examples there. What matters is what is right for your brand, for your company, for your category, for your consumer, your customer. There is no value judgment. All of these spaces offer valuable places for commercial return. Our intent today was to try and open source this kind of approach for you, the big framework for growth, so that you can take it into your businesses as a way to bring consumer-centric, customer-centric thinking and growth into your organization. So let's just talk about what do you need to start developing this. The most important thing about this is it's an incredibly flexible tool. We have created big frameworks for growth where we've had huge amounts of data and lots of reports. Equally, we've created them where we've had almost nothing, and we've sat around with our clients based on our experience, maybe one or two kind of key documents, and developed it very much hypothesis-led. Both are fine. Live with the kind of discomfort of not maybe having all the answers, and be comfortable with what you do know, and then look at how you can plug some gaps. So when we think about that solution axis, what's key here is what people are actually doing rather than what they say they're doing. So usage studies, ethnographic approaches, things like that, brilliant. Market tools, don't be proud here, steal with pride. There are so many brilliant bits of inspiration that you can just steal if you look outside of your category. Trends, fantastic. If you've got a trends agency and reports, brilliant. If you don't, carve out 2-3 hours of your diary, go onto Google and just start searching. Most of these trend websites have free sign-up periods, trial periods, so you can just get all the information for free. B, there's a huge amount that doesn't even exist behind a firewall that's just open source. Take it, grab it, run it. Supplier networks, also a brilliant thing. You've got a massive untapped resource just sat there, people who are desperate to come in and talk to you and tell you what they're doing. So loads of things we can get from solutions. The key is looking far and wide. Don't just look at your category, look at parallel related categories. When it comes to motivations, it's really our start point always is what does an organization already know? We've yet to work with a company that isn't drowning in kind of existing information. Stuff always comes out of the woodworks. Look at those old documents, those reports. What do we already know? Then if you do need to do new work, absolutely, quant communities, qual depths groups, whatever it might be, all kind of fine. But the key is your segmentations will also be really important here in helping. One thing to note, they'll be really good at telling you your current motivations, your future motivations. You probably won't get too much of from your segmentation. Why? Because if it doesn't exist in the category today, which is the very nature of future motivations, it's unlikely to kind of call out. The final point I just make here is that for the purposes of this diagram, you can see it split very beautifully and neatly into current and future, like there's this perfect delineation. Of course, the reality is not quite like that. There is a scale that some of these things will be more emergent, more dominant. So just kind of keep your eyes open and very much seek inspiration from those categories around you. When we shared this a couple of weeks ago, we had an hour and a quarter, which we're condensing into half an hour for today. So I'm afraid this is the section where the biggest casualty has been made. And this is a really important thing. And I would encourage you, if there are further questions, either drop into the Q&A now or feel free to kind of pick up with us post this. But what's really important is if you're going to drive consumer customer-centric growth in the C-suite, this has to grow commercial teeth. We have to have some proper numbers behind this. And we're very pleased that the big framework for growth does that. It's a very commercial tool, giving you clarity on not only where you should play, both today and tomorrow, but how to win and what our ability to win is. So very quickly, top line, and I appreciate I'm not going to give you the full story here, so please bear with me. Always our start point is the category today. Why? Because usually our clients will have some form of segmentation, existing continuous data that you can use to size either exactly or certainly kind of directionally. We start off by putting some euro, pound, dollar signs in there, which are the squares in the areas with most opportunity. Overlaying satisfaction rates is really helpful. What ideally you're looking for is these red squares here where you've got big financial opportunity but relatively low satisfaction. It's also important to start putting some arrows on these motivations and solutions to give a trajectory of growth. Is this a motivation in decline? Is it static? Is it growing? Why? Because as we think about where we want to lay our bets for tomorrow, that's massively important. And then we can even start to overlay brand heartlands as well. So we always start there. Then we need to start to go out and size the future. Now, anyone who tells you they can size the future exactly is lying. No one can do that, 100% certainly. But we absolutely have confidence that the approach we have done many times on this, where we really root it in consumer behaviour. What is this motivation? Is this an additive motivation? Is this going to replace some existing behaviour? Is there another category that we can look at? All of these things are used to put a consumer behaviour view onto a category growth figure, allowing us to size and identify specific opportunities. Then for us, what's really important, and I get the mickey taken out of me a lot by my colleagues, because every time we do an innovation project, I always bang out my favorite line, which is innovation loves focus. The tighter, the clearer the opportunity is, the easier it is to ideate. So once you have identified your spaces, then getting into some detail around, okay, so how do we win? What does this look like? What's the consumer or customer tension? What's the opportunity? What brands can we learn from to give us inspiration? Strategically, how can we profile this in terms of how it might deliver against our objectives and our business strategy? And then this is a really important thing that our clients will then do internally to look at what's our ability to win, what's our R&D capability, our route to market, what might future share look like. Apologies that that's such a quick whistle-stop tour of it, but as I say, if any questions, please do put them in the Q&A or pick up afterwards and we can go through that in more detail. Get all that right, and there's really kind of 4 key things that this can answer. Firstly, portfolio planning, and this is really important. How do we make sure that our portfolio is more than the sum of its parts, that actually different brands are playing in genuinely incremental spaces to one another rather than all sitting on top? Secondly, innovation strategy. Any innovation strategy is effectively a bit of a question of where we best laying our bets. We all know this, the failure rate of innovation, why we have to have such big pipelines, because we know projects can die. The key is placing those bets where we think there's the greatest potential return, and this is crucial for that. Trend prioritization. I've seen many documents, many times when a client said, we've had a brilliant, inspiring trend session, but we don't know which one is the biggest, which horse do we back, which trend do we think is most relevant for us? Brilliant way to start prioritizing that. And then finally, category and brand stretch. As we know, particularly in more developed Western markets, there is so much choice available for consumers and customers. This idea of kind of fundamentally unmet needs is a pretty challenging one, to be honest, in lots of categories. And as a result, brands and categories need to stretch. They need to redefine what they do and what they can give to customers and consumers. And this is very helpful in that respect.
Thank you very much to Simon and Lee. I can't see anything that's come through so far on the questions, but please, if you want to type away as I'm talking, there is one that's come through in advance that I'd just like to ask around. Your case studies are really interesting, but from quite big clients. And I know there were some questions in the room at the last seminar around, do you have any examples where you've done this with smaller budgets and smaller brands and resources?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a business, we're, as Simon mentioned earlier on, we're very much a kind of hypothesis-led first. So start with what a business already knows. And almost certainly across every client we've worked with, the business actually knows significantly more than it thinks it does. So there might be some instances where there are gaps to fill, but very often there is an enormous wealth of data that can be leveraged, that is freely available. As Simon was saying, access to trends that are freely available, using a supplier network, talking to agencies, media agencies, etc., etc. There is a wealth of information that you can access that doesn't require the dispensement of new budget against it.
Great. I guess, and building on that, I've had a question just come through on the Q&A around tips for engaging people in this. Given it's quite a new way of doing it, how do you get your kind of internal teams bought in and understanding this model?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And again, I think the key when we're looking at this is to pull apart those 2 axes the first time. So let's start to look at those solutions. What are we seeing in the category and elsewhere? And the nice thing about that is that that's something that can really be divided and split up amongst the team. As I say, there are lots of different sources, some of which are desk-based, many of which are kind of a case of just getting out there and talking to people and kind of seeing it. So I think when we tend to do this, what we'll do is conduct a big kind of trawl, bring that all back into a place and start to kind of map where we think it exists. As I mentioned on the call, we can easily, sorry, I'm just flicking back. We can easily look at these things and go, oh, well, they're very clearly delineated on this map. Of course, that's not the reality, but I think some of the things that's really useful is just kind of almost getting the physical stimulus out and kind of lining it up and starting to see, okay, what feels very established, what's new, what's emerging, what's coming through. On the motivations, I think absolutely start with the current motivations first. Any segmentation that you might have done, and even if you haven't, then just getting people with some good category experience. I think getting those current motivations, we found, tends to be something that people feel pretty comfortable with and find pretty easy. The future motivations, I think, is something that tends to be a little bit, require a little bit more thinking, a little bit more engagement around it. But it's a very exciting thing to do, because this is where we get into a lot of additional spaces where we could start to explore, and we can start to see some real inspiration around how the category might start to reposition itself.
Okay, fantastic. I guess building on that, a question that's come through again is around how do clients engage you, and do they really need a kind of well-articulated problem to come to you with, or can they come in and have a more general discussion about how to be a bit more innovative as a brand? How developed do those briefs need to be?
Yeah, really great question. I'll be totally honest with you. Often not very developed at all. Often, they will come with a place of, actually, our pipeline doesn't look great. The category forecast looks a bit difficult. We're in a slightly flat/declining market. We are very used to the start point of conversations and briefs being one of, we really don't know what, we kind of know what the problem is, but we don't really know what the question is, yet alone the solution. If that's something you're facing and you're thinking about, then just using this as a way to start to structure your thinking and start to see, okay, where is our category currently, and what are the dimensions that we might be able to start to play with, is a really useful way of approaching it and starting to see potential ways for growth forward. So yeah, a lot of these briefs, a lot of these challenges have started with a very broad, we're in a flat declining market, we're struggling for growth, what might we do about it type place. Fantastic.
Other question just popped in around beyond using trends. How do you identify future motivations?
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly, obviously, trends are very useful, but very often what we're doing as well is we are looking at adjacent categories, and we're looking at behavior more broadly. There is a lot of kind of broad consumer behavior that is agnostic of any category, that at some point we know is going to impact how people are behaving or feeling about our categories. So as you are thinking about motivations, this is a real opportunity to be able to step out of your own category and say, what are we seeing more broadly? What can we see in close-in adjacencies that is going to signify how behavior is going to change and affect our category? And then what can we see more broadly as well? So it's a real opportunity to take that kind of broad outward-looking lens on things.
I think one practical tip that might be helpful here is trying to ladder up from what your product is to what it potentially could do. So, for instance, we worked in one personal care kind of category, which was very much a sort of problem solution category, and that's very much how the category was framed. But actually, if you ladder up from that kind of problem solution and go, well, why is that relevant? What is it that people are actually trying to do? You suddenly start to open up just a little bit more the world of, okay, we could start to play here. The category, it's very rare that the answer to those future motivations will be the category does play to this motivation. It's much more likely that the answer will be the category could play to this motivation.
Great stuff. I think that is all the questions coming in, unless anyone wants to quickly type a last minute one. Thank you very, very much, Simon and Lee, for that. There's lots of really interesting stuff in there, and the slides, I say, are on our website, and also the slides from the seminar as well, which are the same. It goes into a bit more depth in the detail around the model, and are also available on our website if people want to get it. Recordings of today will be available on our YouTube channel, so if you want to go back and have a listen again or share it with a colleague, then do take a look out for that as well. And just while I've got you here, a quick reminder that our next seminar will be the best of MRS in 2019. So you'll be able to find out in January why do the winners of the MRS Awards on Monday win their awards. So they'll be running through some case studies with you. And hopefully you should have all received an email about Quirks and our conference for next year. Please do take a look at that. If you haven't heard from us, then let us know. There is a unique link to sign up to come along to our conference sessions. And it is a win-win because it's a fantastic event to get a free ticket to. But also we have a deal with Quirks where they will donate money to us for every Aura member that attends. And that money gets pushed straight back into providing more events and more content for you guys. So please do make sure you use that link as well. But I think that is everything from us. So thank you very much again, and hopefully see you on a future seminar. Thank you.